Good morning, everybody. We are starting the second day of the International Conference Josué de Castro on food safety and combat of starvation. Food safety and starvation combat are topics of high relevance in the international agenda. This conference is a mark in this international debate that aims to broaden the conversation between government and entities, stimulating the engagement and enhancement of the issues regarding food safety, based on the example of the city of São Paulo. We will start with the panel, the social role of meat. I invite Imeta, the director of Marketing Federation, Nick Smith, researcher of the Sustainable Nutrition Initiative of the University of New Zealand, Diana Rogers, executive director of Global Food Justice Alliance, Miles Allen, chief of Oceanic of the Physics Department and Geosystems Science professor of the University of Oxford. And to moderate this panel, I invite Lyle Bonfim, chief editor and presenter of Canal Rural. I give the floor to Yael, please. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation from Daniel Vargas and all the team that is here in this event. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here to talk about such an important topic, which is the social role of meat. We have been following this for some time, and we've been concerned because of the because of the less consumption of meat during the Olympics, and we have several initiatives in the world, and we've seen with some concern this kind of news about meat because we know that meat is potentially a very nutritive kind of food and a very important component for food safety of the population, and it can also be a problem solver. It can bring problems for climate change issues. So this is what we're going to discuss here today, and I'm very happy to be here with so many renowned people, experts on nutrition and climate, and it's a pleasure to be here introducing myself just briefly. I was born in São Paulo, and I've been working with agribusiness for over 7 years. I love the sector because of the technology, best practices, and of rural producers and agribusiness. And I lead the platform of Canal Rural, that is Planeta Campo. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. So our presenters have already been introduced, and I want to start, but it was not forecast for this panel, but we have Janetta, that is the director of the biggest cooperative in India, focused on milk. He was going to present later in the panel, but he has a flight to take, so he's going to start now first, okay? Thank you. I'll give you the floor.
Good morning, and
Bom dia.
me the greetings from 1.5 billion people from India to your lovely country of Brazil. And it's indeed a great honor and a pleasure for me. And I would like to thank the secretary and the entire organizing team for giving me this opportunity to come here and talk about Amul, a small dairy cooperative which started in India way back in 1946, which has now become the world's largest farmer-owned dairy cooperative with 3.6 million farmers. Over the last 2 days, we have been discussing a lot of interesting things which is related to livelihood, which is related to food, it is related to food security and nutrition. And today, I like to present before you a small example or a case study from India, that how in a large population like ours, with lot of poverty, lot of underdevelopment, lot of more than 60% of the population living in rural areas, how can cooperatives be a solution to providing livelihood and nutrition? So this is the story of Amul. Today we are ranked as the strongest dairy brand in the world and the second strongest food brand in the world by independent researchers. Talking about our numbers, we handle in a year more than 11 billion liters of milk. That is almost 1/3 of the total milk production of Brazil. We collect our milk from 3.6 million farmers. It is about 31 million liters of milk every day, and the sales turnover is about 10 billion US dollars, making us the largest food and FMCG company in India. And in terms of the volume of milk handled, we are the 8th largest in the world. We have Nick with us here, and Fonterra is the second largest dairy in the world. So you can imagine how, as a cooperative, also like Fonterra has been doing a great work, Amul also in Gujarat, in India, has been trying to do this kind of a work. But this is a brand, as I mentioned, it stands for the country, for India. And we started, as I mentioned, a year before India's independence. And how Amul helped India become the largest producer of milk in the world is the story, is what I want to narrate in the next few minutes. So this is where the dairy development model is. And this is where the farmers and the need of the farmers to come together and build a strong dairy industries matter. And to do that, as an organization, we have to be very, very focused on all the different aspects of the business. It is basically thinking about the farmers because they are the owners, also about the consumers because this is what they give us the revenue and the money to keep our farmers happy, focusing on the processes, focusing on the technology, focusing on the products and the marketing. And this is where, if cooperatives are able to do so well, this is where it can make a big difference in livelihood of our farmers and also for the consumers. So first, we'll talk about what the things we do related to our farmers and our milk producers. So as I mentioned, when you start with just 2 village societies and 250 liters of milk, it is a very, very tough call because you're fighting a lot of vested interests in the dairy. It can be a private producer, it can be a multinational company, it can be many other people who are interested into getting more money out of milk, but it is at the cost of the producer and the consumer. So the journey from there to handling more than 31 million liters of milk per day is a story which actually started as a development model, but now it's a tool for women empowerment. And everything what Amul does is keeping the women and the producers in the heart of all our operations. And this is what the 3.6 million liters, 3.6 million farmers of Gujarat do. The model of Amul is very simple. All the farmers or the milk producers in a village, at the bottom you can see, form a village dairy cooperative society. Then all the villages of a particular district form a district milk processing union, which collects all the milk from the farmers in the villages and processes it. And the job of marketing is done by the third tier, which is the provincial state marketing federation. Like we are there in Gujarat, this is what it is. And we directly connect the producer with the consumer. So this is a very simple Amul model which was replicated across India, and because of this, under a program which is called the Operation Flood, India became the largest producer of milk in the world. And this is where you can see the numbers. Can you click next, please? So you can see the numbers in Gujarat on the left-hand side. We have 3.6 million farmers. We collect milk from 18,000 villages of Gujarat. We have 18 district unions who are the members of the federation, and we are the state marketing federation. The model that was replicated across India on the right side, you can see there are 16.9 million families, farmer families who are members of the cooperatives, 190,000, about 200,000 village dairy cooperatives are there in India. There are 245 modern dairy plants which are run by these farmer cooperatives, and there are 28 state federations. So every state of India has a brand. So you can say Amul created competition for itself. But because of the cooperatives together, we are able to take on every single multinational or every single private player in the country. More importantly, work for development. And you can see connecting directly producers with the consumers, with the largest share of the consumers' dollar, rupee or real going back to the producer. And this is what is the success of the cooperative model. And 80%, as I mentioned, of what the consumer pays goes back to the producer. Any developed country or anywhere in the world, the producer only gets 1/3 share of what a consumer pays. This ratio is perhaps the highest in the world, which means you're keeping both people happy, the producer on one side and the consumer on the other side. And this is what happens to the thing. And because of this entire evolution, milk has become the largest agricultural crop of India. India is among the largest producers of wheat, rice, oilseeds in the world. But the value of output of milk in India is more than wheat, paddy, and oilseeds put together. So this is how you can imagine when a collective of farmers come together, have an institutional mechanism, a simple product like milk also can become a game changer for the country. And India Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi was the president of G20 last year, which I'm happy that Brazil has taken over the mandate this year. Amul was made the institutional partner of W20, and because the role women play and the cooperatives play, we got this opportunity to do so. And this is what is a model for rural development and women empowerment, which the world has noted, and the women-led development, which Honorable Prime Minister spoke about, and now everybody in the world said, we're not just discussing about women's development. It is the women-led development is what is the focus for the world, and this is a shining example for this. Now, as a brand, we deal with the billions of consumers. I'll tell a fun fact that we do 22 billion packs of Amul products in 1 year. That is more than, I think, Coca-Cola also. So every single pack of butter, cheese, ghee, milk, ice cream, chicken, gulab jamun, and I'll tell about the products. It's a big focus on consumer marketing and value addition through consumer marketing and brand building. So when we deal with millions of producers, we call it value for many because there are a large number of farmers. And for the consumer, it is value for money. And being in the business for more than 7 decades, we have not compromised on the taste, on the quality, and have maintained the same recipe and taste. You see people replacing milk fat with vegetable fat and selling it as, calling it as ice cream, though it's not an ice cream. And same is case of cheese or margarine replacing butter and so on and so forth. We have managed to preserve the quality, and that is where brings in the trust of our consumers. And you can see a big range of Amul product portfolio. We have more than 50 products, 1,000 plus SKUs, and the product range, be it from milk in pouches, which is just 48-hour shelf life, to butter and cheese and the ghees and the ice creams and the dairy-based sweets and the beverages, and whole lot of products that we have as a part of our portfolio, trying to meet the requirements of the consumers, changing requirements of customers, looking at distribution across the length and breadth of a country, which is very big, with a population of 1.5 billion, and going in for expansion in the portfolio, going as per the changing tastes and demands of the customers. And as I mentioned that if you have such a large portfolio and you're competing with the best in the world and also globally, you need to be always on your toes. And that is what we have been doing, continuous innovation, using milk as a core ingredient. But how do you innovate milk into multiple forms, products, use innovation, use technology, develop a range of products which are not, new to the world, new to the country, be it the high protein buttermilk, high protein lassi, or whey protein concentrates or milkshakes, all at a very, very affordable price, and tasty products, so that we are able to meet the changing aspirations of customers, focusing on probiotics, using our buttermilk as a delivery mechanism. With 3 million liters of buttermilk sold every day, Amul is already the largest brand of probiotics in the world. And same in case of organics also, that if farmers want to, if we want to preserve the soil of the country from chemical fertilizers and pesticides, the farmers have to be trained to get into organics. Consumers also have to be told about this, and this is also one of our another initiative to be the producer, be a bridge between the producer and the consumer. And now we look at the processes in place. It's a cow to consumer entire supply chain fully controlled by the farmers on a common software using technology. So on this left side, you can see from at 18,600 villages, if 3.6 million farmers bring in milk twice a day, any quantity of milk is, every liter of milk is tested, chilled right at the village level, and then it directly goes in the market through processing at 100 dairy plants, variety of products that are manufactured and supplied into the market. The entire focus of the supply chain is very clear. Either you reduce cost or improve efficiency. And that's how you're able to pass on the largest share of the consumer's dollar or rupee or euro to the producer. And then what do we do for technology? So every aspect of the business is on a common platform of technology. Farmers have an app on which they can see the transactions, they can buy and sell cattle, like we saw yesterday from some of the companies here. to consumers on an app, distributors on an app, salesmen selling on a same platform, and the entire backbone of distribution using technology that we do. So this is where Amul has a vision, not just for India, but also for the world. And what happens tomorrow is what is Amul interested in. So today, if the world milk production is 930 million metric tons, India is about 230 million metric tons, which is 24% of the world. Organized sector of India is about 20%, and Amul handles 1/4 of that. So you can see that there is still a great opportunity for Amul to keep doubling its operation in the country also. As more and more milk comes from unorganized to organized sector, consumers shift from loose to package and branded. This is what you are also able to do. But this is what is very, very interesting. In the next 10 years, Amul will produce 1/3 of the total milk in the world. So this is a great opportunity for India to become a dairy to the world, Amul to be a brand preferred in the world, and how we can leverage the power of a cooperative to do that is the opportunity that we are all able to see. And this is where is a journey we want to cover in the next 10 to 20 years and see that we are able to do. So while the model is respected in the country, we also look at tying up with different dairy cooperatives around the world. You can see we launched milk in US last month, tying up with MMP, a Michigan-based dairy cooperative, and we are using the strength of cooperatives to leverage the brand and the consumer preference around the world. And this is what, if India becomes 1/3 of the total milk in the world, there is also a mission to set up another 200,000 village dairy cooperative societies in next 5 to 10 years in the country. So more women become a part of it, more milk comes as a part of the organized sector, and that's how the entire dairy industry goes. Sustainability is a very, very important part which we've been discussing yesterday also. We are showing a solution to the world. The cow is not a problem, cow is a solution. So like we have the mechanism to collect milk from 3.6 million farmers, we have started collecting dung also from the cows. It is a win-win situation because the farmer gets additional income from the dung. The dung is converted into methane, methane into compressed biogas. We can run cars, we can light the stove in the house of a farmer, and more importantly, as the technology evolves, we can also generate green hydrogen out of it. So we can become a solution provider to India's major problem, because India imports a lot of fuel, India imports a lot of fertilizer, because what gets left behind is organic fertilizer, which goes back to the soil and helps the farmers. So this is the situation we are working towards and trying to prove that cow is not a problem, cow is a solution, and all developing countries of the world can emulate this kind of a thing for greater benefit to the society, to the environment. And as at the end, I would like to also mention that cooperatives have now been considered as a tool for development in the country in a very big way. We have a new Ministry of Cooperation that focuses on bringing out the role of cooperatives in every single sector of the country. We have 3 new multi-state cooperatives which recently we started, and we are promoting that. One is a multi-state cooperative on seeds, other on organics, and third on exports. So this is how energy is being brought into the cooperative sector. Dynamism is being brought into it, professionalism is brought into it, and with farmer involvement, we are able to become a dominant player in the world. And as I mentioned, if India has benefited out of this model, we are working with other developing countries of the world also. So we are working with Sri Lanka to set up a similar model in that country. We are working with Kenya also to replicate this model for the benefit of their farmers, their producers, and make those countries self-sufficient in milk and a very important factor of the society. And finally, as we talk of sustainability and SDGs, you can see that the model of dairy can tick most of the boxes here. You can also look at poverty alleviation, which is very important, zero hunger, which is what we are able to do, health and well-being of the consumers we are able to promote. Because the farmers get good income, you're focusing on quality education, gender equality because of women empowerment is very clean water is required for milk and milk production. That's what we're also focusing on. We're talking about affordable and clean energy. We're talking of work conditions and economic growth, technology and industry revolution happening simultaneously. Inequality in the society is being reduced. As you know, India has been traditionally like that. The cities, communities develop very well, consumption becomes responsible, climate action is very important, and more importantly, the peace and the strong institutions and partnerships are the goal. So this is the power of cooperatives, this is the power of working for a collective, and this is going to make a big difference in the lives of everyone. So while I talked about a lot of numbers in all the sides, be it business or the milk, I would like to summarize that our currency is not milk. Our currency is trust. It's trust of millions of farmers, trust of 1 billion consumers, and that is what makes the brand grow and continuously work towards making progress into this. Honorable Prime Minister attended the Golden Jubilee celebrations of Amul, And to the farmers, he told that he wants Amul to be the strongest and the biggest brand in the world. And he says that we need to continue to persevere, to build on the trust which cooperatives had, and build a stronger nation and be a solution and hope for the world. And I'll end with a quote from Dr. Kurian, our founder chairman, that this is a thing we need to continue to work on because we hold in trust the aims and aspirations of millions of countrymen. And this is what I'll end the slide finally. The love between India and Brazil does not just exist with the Gir cows that we gave 100 years back to the country. It's the love for football and the soccer which every Indian in the world, every Indian loves. And all these Brazilian stars, be it Pele or Neymar or Ronaldo or Rivaldo, they are all the stars in the country and everybody loves them. And that's what makes India and Brazil connect very, very strongly. Thank you so much for the time, and my regards to all of you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Muito obrigada ao Jaime Mehta pela explicação. Muito bacana a gente,
Thank
muito bacana a
Jaime
gente
Mehta
ver.
for the explanation. That was amazing. It's great to see how cooperatives are an example to develop societies, also the economy and people's inclusion. Should you need to get your flight, you're free to go. We know you're flying soon, so feel free to leave whenever you think it's necessary. Now we have mixed meat. Alguém tem alguma pergunta para mim?
I will watch it from the audience and leave. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for accommodating me in this schedule. And I would like to thank you all once again. And my thanks to the interpreters also for doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Obrigada. Pode ficar à vontade, Nick Smith.
Nick Smith, you can start whenever you're ready.
Bom dia. Thank you very much for the invitation to come here, my first time in South America, to speak at this conference. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the organization. I am Nick Smith, and I work on a research program called the Sustainable Nutrition Initiative at the Ritter Institute, Massey University in New Zealand. We exist to champion the role of nutrition in sustainability, because any high-level definition you look at for sustainable food systems, sustainable diets from the FAO, the WHO, all have nutrition as a central element. Level panel of experts. Nutrition and food security for all is the first tenet of a sustainable food system in such a way that it is economically, environmentally sustainable into the future. So all of those aspects are important, the environmental, the economic, the social, all essential for sustainability. Today, though, I'm going to speak exclusively about the nutrition elements of sustainable food systems. And when I talk about sustainable food, there are several ways in which you can think about this. Most people will immediately think about themselves. Sustainable food for me. What do I need to eat to have a healthy, sustainable, affordable diet? And that's really important, essential to think about. A group like this today, we might be thinking more on a national level. What does my country need to produce, need to trade, to ensure that we feed our population well, but also have the economic benefit of food? And then finally, there's the really big picture, the global picture. How does the world produce food to feed the world? All important aspects, and I'm going to talk about each of the three in large to small order as I go through today. So, I will explain this. Please don't try and read and interpret it yourself. My team does a lot of data science, taking existing data about the food system to understand what it means for nutrition. So what you're seeing here is the food sources for 29 essential nutrients in the human diet. Because nutrition is not just calories, not just protein. We have to think about all of the micronutrients as well, so the vitamins, the minerals that are essential for good health. Now, what you should take away from this picture immediately is how much gold and how much green there is. 75% of the food the world consumes is plant-source food. So, as you'd expect, for most nutrients, plants are the most important part of human nutrition. But there are some key exceptions, and I'll highlight, for example, the big chunk of red here is vitamin B12. So more than half of global supply of vitamin B12 going into people's mouths is coming from meat. And there are several other nutrients, for example, vitamin A, protein, iron, for which the contribution of meat is significant. What's more useful, though, is to look at this picture compared to what the world needs. So now you're seeing the same numbers, but they're just scaled against what the world needs, which is this horizontal black line across the middle. So, immediate takeaway from this is quite positive. Most of those colored bars are sitting above the black line. So for most nutrients, global supply is in excess of what the world needs. But if we come further to this near edge here, we see several nutrients that are at the line and a few that are below. Things like calcium, vitamin E, vitamin B12, vitamin A. So these are the things that we really need to be thinking about. And you can see how important the red is, the contribution of meat, to particularly vitamin B12, vitamin A there. It's not the answer to everything the world needs, but it is quite important for some of those things that are in short supply. So, the obvious question: what would happen if we took meat out of the system tomorrow? What would happen to global nutrient supply? These pictures, the charts, are macronutrients, so energy, protein, fat. The left-hand bar is what it looks like today against requirement. The right-hand bar is what it would look like if you took meat out, including the reallocation of food that currently goes to animal feed back to human food. And you can see that for those macronutrients, no problem. Supply was so high compared to requirement in 2020 that if you take meat out, you still have sufficiency. I'll emphasize this is at the global level. Clearly there are countries, there are populations, there are individuals for which this is not true, but at the global level, this is what the picture looks like. However, down at the bottom here, we have the nutrients that would appear in shortfall against global requirement in this situation. Calcium and vitamin E haven't really changed, but vitamin A, vitamin B12, these are new gaps between supply and requirement, and quite large gaps. Only half of vitamin B12 requirement would be available in this situation. So, from a global perspective, meat currently plays an important role in the supply, particularly of key micronutrients. It's not a protein story. There's a lot of protein in the world, but it is a micronutrient story. So, what if we think about this same sort of question, but at a national level? This is the same picture for Brazil. This is not a pretty picture, Brazil, for a few reasons, and it's also very different to the global picture. So first of all, we have a larger number of nutrients at the low end that are falling below that requirement line. And they're also different ones to the global level. A lot of plant source nutrients starting to appear. Things like potassium, things like folate that we commonly associate with plant source foods. What I'll also emphasize is the amount of red in this picture compared to the global. So Brazil's meat consumption is far higher than the global average. And you can see how much of a contribution that is making, particularly to nutrients at the far end that you have a lot of already. There are a few things: iron, vitamin A, for which meat is making a really crucial contribution in the Brazilian food system. But there are several other things that you would not be able to fill that gap with more meat. So I certainly think from this picture, there is much room for rebalancing the Brazilian diet, the Brazilian food supply, which I'm sure is not news to you. I'm sure you're very aware of the extent of micronutrient deficiency and poor diets in Brazil. Just backing that up here. My goodness, I'm going far quicker than I expected. So, the last perspective I want to address is the individual, my diet. This is probably the most widely addressed question in sustainable food and nutrition. What do I need to eat to have a healthy, affordable, acceptable diet? So many papers exist that are using mathematical modeling of some form or another to look at this question, to look at what tweaks could be made to diets to improve them. Usually, these are based in high-income countries, but there are studies that have spanned across, I think, about 175 countries in the world have approached this sort of diet modeling to see what changes would be needed. We have our own in my team, but unfortunately at the moment it only works for New Zealand and for the Netherlands. It's very hard to pull all of the data you need together on food prices, nutritional composition, what people currently eat, to build these sorts of models. So I'm going to speak more generally about what this sort of work has found globally in comparable countries. Why is this important? This is important because this sort of work often informs dietary guidelines. So you mentioned, Chair, about the calls for reductions in meat consumption. Often that's coming from food-based dietary guidelines, which have used this sort of work to inform where they're going. So what you generally find in these studies, if you give a computer a lot of information about current diets and say, make these healthier, make these cheaper, make these have a lower environmental impact, you tend to see meat disappear from those diets because it is an easy target for a computer to reduce many of those things all at once just by changing one food group. If anything, you will sometimes see the most nutrient-dense forms, so offal, liver, kidney, appearing as part of these solutions when you're looking at an individual diet. The story is a bit better for some of the other animal source food groups. If Jayan was still here, milk is very hard to get rid of in these sort of optimization studies. It tends to remain even when you put very strict environmental limits because of the broader nutrient content of it and the lower relative emissions compared to something like meat. So that's quite a different message on the individual basis to what we were seeing at the national and the global level. And that's something that I really want to emphasize here, is that you cannot think about the role of any one food group at just one level of resolution. You will get a different answer if you ask about the role of meat globally, to if you ask about its role nationally, to if you ask about its role in a healthy diet for an individual. None of these answers is wrong, but all of them are incomplete without seeing what the system impacts are. You could not say everyone needs to eat a meat-free diet tomorrow and expect the food production system to change to make that happen. It does not work to pick what you think is a perfect diet and then extrapolate what that means for food production globally. You have to approach this from multiple perspectives to find out what the real answer is, what the right balance of different food groups is in diets and in production. So, to close, it is not news to anyone that meat is a really nutrient-dense product. What I would like to emphasize is that it is not protein alone, and in my opinion, not even protein, as the major reason for this nutrient density. It is the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that we should be talking about when we're talking about the role of meat. And as I just emphasized, the picture, the answer you get about meat is different at the global, at the national, at the individual level. Globally, meat's a really important source of some of those micronutrients, things like vitamin A, vitamin B12, keeping them at a level of sufficiency for the global population currently. Nationally in Brazil, it's a really big part of diet, therefore it's a really big part of nutrition. But what the Brazilian population, Brazilian individuals need from a nutrient supply perspective is not really more meat. It needs to be more balanced diets. Meat is contributing a lot, but not to the things that are in short supply. And at the individual level, yes, it is perfectly possible to have a healthy, sustainable diet that does or does not contain meat. That does not necessarily mean you scale that diet to a global population. It also does not mean that one or the other will be acceptable to every individual in a population. Now, if any of this is remotely useful or interesting to you, everything that I have presented today is freely available on our website, in our published papers. You can find everything on sustainablenutritioninitiative.com. Please go there and use it if it is useful to you. And I would like to thank again the organizers for inviting me and all of you for your attention. Obrigado.
Obrigada, Nick. Muito obrigada. Bom, a
Thank
gente
you,
tem
Nick.
aqui a Diana Rogers,
Thank you
que
very
também
much. And
o
now we
Miles
have
Allen
Diana
vai participar
Rogers
online.
and Miles
Eu acho que talvez a
Allen
gente
that
possa
is
ir
going to
primeiro com a
participate
Diana Rogers,
online.
que tá aqui já
I
preparada
think
com a
that we
gente.
can start
Então,
with
fique à
Diana
vontade,
Rogers,
Diana, a
that
palavra
is
é sua.
already here with us, so the floor is yours.
Here we go. Oh,
Vamos lá, então.
okay. Red meat, a powerful ally in the battle against obesity and undernutrition. This is actually the title of a paper that I am submitting this week to the Journal of Nutrition because we talk a lot about hunger and what can we do about hunger, but there are many forms of malnutrition and overnutrition or overeating, yet being nutrient poor, basically, is also a big problem. And for the first time in the world, overweight and obese people outnumber underweight people. So we've got a double problem here where we have people who need to eat more food, and then we have people who are eating too much of the wrong type of food. So I'm going to be talking about meat's role in both hunger and in other forms of malnutrition, which includes obesity. And so you may have heard that meat is being unfairly vilified, and the main pillars, of course, are nutrition, environment, and ethics. And I think we need more people to understand the broader argument. We've got a lot of people in silos that understand only nutrition or only the environmental issues. I've been to conferences where it's just philosophers talking about should we eat meat. You know, you can't talk about that without fully understanding the nutrition and environmental impacts of a diet with or without meat. My nonprofit, the Global Food Justice Alliance, was started because of the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit in New York City. The Eat Lancet diet was being heavily promoted at that conference as the ideal diet for human health and the environment. It has been proven that it is a nutrient poor diet that would leave gaps in our nutrition. And because this diet was being heavily influenced at this meeting, I took a truck and I went to the streets in New York handing out meat and talking about the importance of meat for the planet, meaning for the environment and for the humans who are living here. And the reason I called my book and my film Sacred Cow is two meanings. So one is the meaning that a sacred cow is an idea, custom, or institution held especially unreasonably to be above criticism. It's just assumed that meat is bad in many circles, but actually cattle are sacred. They're one of our best tools for climate change and for human nutrition. And so much of my job is this. So I will explain how meat is healthy, why it doesn't cause cancer, but then they say, well, how can you eat a beautiful animal? So then I'll talk about the ethics of why everything, that is living has to come from something that has died. Then they'll say, but the greenhouse gases, but the land use issue, but the water. So again, it's really important for more nutritionists, more environmental experts, and more philosophers to understand the full argument. And I think that's why a lot of people aren't talking about it, because they feel uncomfortable addressing the other sides. This Meatless Mondays is a program that has taken over the New York City public schools, which is the biggest school system in the US. There's nothing true about any of these messages here, and yet these are the messages that are out there that are taking over social media that people are just assuming are correct. But livestock do not create more emissions than the entire transportation sector. And there's more to come. So with the Paris Olympics, we have leaf over beef, which is the big message to reduce the the meat that is served at the Olympics by 50%. And then I was in Sharm el-Sheikh speaking at the UN climate change talks, and of course you have that coming here too. And I just am going to bet that Brazilian beef is going to be something on the chopping block with the main narrative at this meeting. And so I've created a lot of graphics, and some of them have been translated into Portuguese, like this one here. I'm not going to be talking about the environment in this talk, but I have a lot of resources at my website. And this one in particular is something that the politicians don't understand, that the methane created by cattle breaks down into H2O, which is water, and CO2, which is carbon dioxide, which is then part of the rain cycle and part of the photosynthesis cycle. So it's not the same as burning fossil fuels on the left, which is unlocking ancient carbon and methane and burning it directly into the environment. So this is for free, just at Sacred Cow. Also, there was a study in the US that looked at what would happen if we removed meat from the US diet, and what they found was a reduction in important micronutrients, calcium, vitamin A, B12, and fatty acids. But they also saw that overall calories would go up and overall carbohydrates would go up, which is not what the US needs. We don't need more calories and more carbohydrates. In addition, the greenhouse gas emissions would only be reduced by 2.6%. So it was a pretty meaningless reduction in greenhouse gases for an expensive price to pay for a nutrition gap. There has only been one study that I know of that looked at meat versus less meat, and it was in children in Kenya. One group of school children got a meat snack. One group of school children had extra calories. One group had milk, and there was a control group with no snack. And it was the meat group that by far excelled in every category they were testing. So they tested behavior, physical abilities, and academics. And the meat group, the ones that got more meat, did the best. And when we compare the most common non-processed protein source, so beans, against meat, when you take the same size portion, so this is 113 grams of beef versus beans, you can see it's not just about total protein, but about the array of amino acids that we need as humans. And just a small portion of beef nearly meets all of the amino acids at 181 calories, 30 grams of protein. And then, of course, as Nick was talking about the micronutrients, you can see that on the left, the meat supplies 95% in just a very small portion of meat of B12, which is a very common nutrient deficiency, and other micronutrients. The same comes with minerals. We have zinc, selenium, and other nutrients that are much higher in the meat portion than in the bean portion. And actually, in every case, the animal source nutrient, if there's a nutrient that's found in both animals and plants, it's the animal source nutrient that our body can best use. It's most bioavailable to humans. So this is a good example with beta carotene. That's what makes plants orange. And not many people are able to efficiently make the conversion. About half of all humans can't efficiently make the conversion to retinol, which is the usable form of vitamin A. And so in meat, the vitamin A in meat and milk is in the proper form that we need. So I'm just going to talk about some of the most important nutrients that we get from meat. Of course, there's protein, vitamin B12, iron, and zinc. And these are the nutrients that I focused on in the paper that we'll be publishing. So when we talk about the protein in meat, it is a complete, contains all the essential amino acids. Plants do not. It's efficient, so it's a better protein to calorie ratio. So meaning you get more protein versus calories. So this is very important when we're thinking about people who are overweight, who need to reduce their calories and yet feel full. And protein is the most satiating macronutrient. And so for less calories, you can feel more full. So as a clinician, when I'm meeting with somebody about changing their diet, if I up their protein and don't do anything else, they're naturally going to eat less of the calories that are not as good for them because they feel more full. Iron deficiency, which is the most common cause of anemia, it is incredibly prevalent in the world globally. 30% of women of reproductive age and almost 40% of children. And this is not limited to countries of a low income. In the US and the UK, it's about 1 in 5 women of childbearing age. And the heme iron in meat is the most bioavailable type of iron. And of course, low iron leads to fatigue and can also lead to developmental delays in children. Zinc is another common nutrient deficiency that its absorption is actually inhibited when we eat certain plants. The phytates in the plants actually block the absorption of zinc. So vegetarians are at a much higher risk, and it also impacts brain development in children, pore healing, skin problems. And then finally, vitamin B12, we have deficiency is about 6% of those under age 60. In Latin America, it's a little bit higher. And B12 is only found in animal source foods. And there are cases of children being born to vegan mothers who were even supplementing with B12, and the babies died because B12 can cause very serious neurological damage and even permanent brain damage. So the vulnerable populations that are benefiting from meat, we have children, elderly, women of childbearing age, and people who are looking to lose weight. Now, is meat associated with cancer, with heart disease? Well, those are correlational studies, and I'm just using this as an example of a correlation. So for those of you who have studied statistics, you know that just because one thing is associated with something else, it doesn't mean it caused it. So for example, the solar power generated in Argentina correlates perfectly with Google searches for "do vaccines work?" But that doesn't mean that a search led to the solar power in Argentina. Also, these studies that are looking at diet are very difficult to do because they're relying mostly on diet recall, and people have been known to lie on these sheets that they need to fill out. They're not likely to remember everything that they ate, and they also might remember the cheeseburger that they ate, but they might forget the beverage that they had, the deep fried dessert that they had, those types of things. But aren't we eating too much meat? Don't we have to at least reduce our meat consumption? And when we look at 1970 to 2017, we can see in the US, red meat consumption actually went down. What is going up are calories from grains, which is ultra-processed grains usually, oils, and a little bit more chicken. Globally, the red meat per capita is also flat. It is not increasing per capita on a global level. The big problem that we have in the US, and it's growing in Latin America, of course, is ultra-processed foods. These are foods that are incredibly delicious. There are very smart people working at these companies to make sure that you kind of can't stop eating them. And so it's very easy to overeat these. They are poor in nutrients, and this is the main problem. And these are the companies that are benefiting when we say that meat is the problem. So these are the places you can find me. I have just a handful of copies of my book on me to give away. I don't want to take them home in my suitcase with me. You can also find my film, Sacred Cow, on YouTube, and these are my websites. I know the book is currently being translated into Portuguese. I don't know when it will be out, though. So thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Diana. A gente vem acompanhando o seu trabalho já há bastante tempo e realmente é muito interessante a gente ver essa importância da nutrição da carne, desses aspectos todos, para a gente realmente conseguir ter cada vez mais segurança alimentar, com qualidade nutricional dos alimentos.
With the nutritional quality from food that we want. Now we have Miles Allen. He's going to talk a little bit about the issue related to the climate part of beef. And now he's going to go deeper into that. Miles, you're very welcome to our conference. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me participate in this way. I'm very sorry I can't be with you, but it's the middle of term time here in Oxford, so I have lecturing duties to do, so I'm delighted I can speak to you anyway. I had some slides which I'm hoping we could show. Can you put my slides up and just let me know when they're up, please? Thank you. So I wanted to talk to you about how we quantify and reduce the warming impact of livestock methane emissions. Methane has been mentioned already. It's the main way in which livestock, not the only way, but the main way in which livestock affects climate. And if we go to the next slide, we have around methane, we have a challenge, we have an obstacle, and we have an opportunity. The challenge, and by the way, I must apologize that my slides are in English. I should have provided them earlier to allow them to be translated into Portuguese, but I hope we can do that. I will make them available to the organizers and they can translate them for you. The challenge is that we all need farmers to help us meet our climate goals, including by reducing global methane emissions, by helping to reduce global methane emissions. The problem we have is that we have a widespread misunderstanding of the influence of methane on global climates, and this goes back a long way to something called the carbon footprint, which you have probably all heard of, which is based on something called carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, which you probably haven't heard of, but they are very important because they give a very misleading impression of the impact of methane on climate. But we have an opportunity as well, because if we were to refocus climate policy on warming, which after all is what we are really trying to address, we want to stop global warming as soon as possible, then that would actually make it easier to include agriculture in climate policy, it would make it fairer on livestock farmers, and it could actually result in faster reductions in the current rate of warming. So previous speakers spoke of the forthcoming Conference of the Parties, COP30 in Belém, in Brazil, as a challenge for the Brazilian livestock industry. But I'd like you to see this as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to address the way in which we treat livestock in global climate discussions to make it fairer on everybody, on you and on everyone else. Let me explain with a few illustrations in this talk. Can I go to the next slide, please? I apologize, this is US data, not Brazilian data. If there's any students in the audience who are interested, they just have to email me and we will maybe try and do this again for Brazil, because I think it would be interesting to see what the results would be. But this shows you on the left the territorial emissions, that's emissions of greenhouse gases within the United States over the past 170 years or so. And on the right, focusing in, notice the factor 10 change in scale, focusing in on US agriculture. And you'll notice in the US, total emissions from US agriculture rose rapidly between the 1930s and the 1970s, but have since been fairly stable. And those total emissions are mostly a combination of methane and nitrous oxide. And in fact, the big increase between the 1930s and the 1970s was nitrous oxide emissions, not methane. The picture in Brazil, I checked the data, but I didn't have time to redo all the calculations. The picture in Brazil is much more one of increasing methane and nitrous oxide emissions. So it's a slightly different picture to the one in the US. If we go to the next slide, thank you. This shows you the warming impact of those emissions. And I just want you to look at the nitrous oxide, which comes from fertilizer use, some from manure, and methane emissions, contributions to warming in the right-hand panel. You'll notice that methane contribution to warming has, in the United States, leveled off. It's flat. Since the 1980s, methane emissions from agriculture in the United States of America have not added to any additional warming. But the nitrous oxide emissions, which, if you remember the previous slide, were about the same over this period, using that CO2 equivalent emissions idea, have caused a lot of warming. The warming from nitrous oxide has doubled over this period in the United States due to US agriculture. So why are they so different? If we go to the next slide, the problem is not our understanding of methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide. The science of how these gases behave is extremely well understood. The problem is the idea that they are somehow equivalent greenhouse gases. They're not. The next slide, please. If emissions are rising, either of methane or of carbon dioxide, that causes warming. If we go to the next slide, if emissions are constant, carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide both continue to cause warming as long as their emissions are above zero. But constant methane emissions cause only a very small amount of warming. And if we go to the next slide, falling carbon dioxide emissions cause warming to decelerate or slow down. So you can see the carbon dioxide temperature curve is leveling off. But if we go to the next slide, falling methane emissions cause warming to actually reverse, to fall. And the reason for this is very simple. It's that carbon dioxide accumulates in the climate system like lead in the bloodstream. You remember when we were very concerned about lead in petrol? The reason lead is so poisonous is that if you breathe in a bit of some air containing lead fumes from cars, it accumulates in your body. You can't get rid of it. Carbon dioxide is like that. If we emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it stays there forever, keeping the planet a bit warmer. But if you reduce your methane emissions, methane, in contrast, has quite a short lifetime. Short for a climate scientist like me, that's only about 10 years. And that means if you reduce your methane emissions, then methane concentrations in the atmosphere immediately start to fall and temperatures fall with them. So let's go to the next slide. I just want to emphasize how well established this science is, and it was summed up in this sentence in the most recent assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is that expressing methane emissions as carbon dioxide equivalent emissions using the standard 100-year global warming potential overstates the effect of constant methane emissions on global surface temperature by a factor of 3 to 4, while understating the effect of any new methane emission source by a factor of 4 to 5 over the 20 years following the introduction of the new source. Now, it's quite a long sentence. I'm happy to leave my slides with the organizers. You may have to read this sentence several times over to think about what it means. But can I point out to you two things straight away? These factors are big. This is not some academic complaining that the numbers are wrong by 10%. That is a big overstatement of the impact of constant methane emissions, and it's a big understatement of the impact of new methane emission sources. So we need to fix this. We are misleading ourselves in how methane from agriculture and from other sources is affecting climate at the moment with the out-of-date accounting systems we use to compare greenhouse gases. If we go to the next slide, let me just explain what this means in numbers. When people calculate the conventional carbon footprint, they multiply your methane emissions in tons of methane by a factor of 28 to give a number of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. But this does not indicate the impact of those methane emissions on global temperature. It just gives you the wrong answer. If we go to the next slide, If you want to know what your methane emissions are actually doing to global temperature, the calculation is actually very simple. You need to multiply your present methane emissions, your methane emissions this year, by a much bigger number, 128, but then you subtract your methane emissions from 20 years ago, multiplied by 120. And that gives you an accurate impression, an accurate indication of the impact of methane emissions on global temperature. I'm showing you this formula because time and again, environmentalists and policymakers tell me, oh, it's too complicated. Nobody will ever understand this. And I say, well, before we were doing one multiplication, now I'm saying do two multiplications and a subtraction. Most of us learned subtraction before we learned multiplication at school. So it's not really very complicated. As I say, I'll leave the slides with you and you can mull over what it means. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some of the implications. So if your methane emissions are constant, as the United States methane emissions have been for the past 30, 40 years, then you're only multiplying by 8. That's the difference between 128 and 120. So that conventional carbon footprint is a factor of 3.5 too high, because it was 28, not 8. Okay? So farmers tend to like this message. But there is another message, so it's very important you keep listening. Let's go to the next slide. If your methane emissions have risen in the past 20 years, you have to multiply your new methane emissions by 128. And that's why the conventional factor of 28 is 4.5 times too low for new methane emissions. And my ears were pricking up when I heard our colleague from the Indian Dairy Cooperative talking about how he hoped to grow Indian dairy production over the next 20 years. And I really hope we're thinking about the potential impact of that development on global temperature. It's very important that we understand these things. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but I'm saying we should know what it means for global temperature. If we go to the next slide, there's one really interesting implication of this, which is that if you can reduce methane emissions by about 3% per decade, 6% over 20 years, or 8 over 128, that's where the number comes from, then if you look carefully at this formula, you realize that your warming equivalent emissions are then net zero, meaning your methane emissions are no longer adding or subtracting anything from global temperature. So if the livestock industry can manage to reduce its methane emissions through interventions like better manure management, which again, our colleague from the Indian Dairy Cooperative mentioned as something you could do to capture methane generated from manure, and you don't need to reduce it very much to actually reduce the overall warming impact of methane emissions to net zero. And there's even better news. If we go to the next slide, if you manage to reduce methane emissions by more than 6% over 20 years, that has the same impact on global temperature as actually taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So it's negative carbon dioxide warming equivalent emissions. That actually draws down global temperatures. So if we go to the next slide, you could say these are almost equivalent drivers of climate change. The top panel shows you a closed power station. When it was burning, when it was in use, it generated a lot of global warming. But that was a long time ago, and now it's not causing any warming anymore. In the bottom panel, you see a herd of cattle. And let's assume that the farmer is managing their cattle in such a way with vaccines or feed additives to reduce methane emissions gradually 10% over 30 years. So 3% per decade. That methane, that herd of cattle did cause some warming when it was built up by the farmer's grandfather or grandmother a long time ago, but it's not causing any warming anymore. And yet, in most greenhouse gas accounting systems, these two things are treated very differently. And if we go to the next slide, the opportunity we have is to think about how we can reframe climate policy in terms of warming outcomes. And this is something you could really make some history in Belém next year if you introduce this idea of warming-based emissions accounting into the UNFCCC. You'll have to persuade your government to do it, of course, because the UNFCCC works through governments. At the moment, at present, if a crop farmer converts land to forest, then they are rewarded for reducing global temperature because they are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But if a livestock farmer reduces the methane emissions from their herd, then they would simply be told they are causing less global warming than they were causing before, even though both farms may actually have identical impacts on global temperature, past, present, and future. So I think we can fix this. If we want to pursue a temperature goal, we need to penalize actions that increase global temperatures, and we need to reward actions that reduce global temperatures, provided, of course, those reductions are permanent. And this is something we can all work towards. If we go to the next slide, please. I believe that if we refocus climate policy on warming outcomes, rather than this outdated idea of warming equivalent emissions, using this carbon footprint idea, which doesn't work, it does not indicate impact on global temperature. It could be a win for both the livestock industry and the planet. If we go to the next slide, please. Globally, livestock methane emissions are increasing, and this is a problem. This is causing very significant global warming. But around the world, there are huge variations in what we might call methane productivity. That's the amount of methane produced per kilo of product. We need to reduce the amount of methane we produce globally, which means we need to make sure that our herds are productive, that we generate more product, less methane. We need to reward livestock farmers equally for reducing global temperatures by reducing CO2 or by reducing methane. And that would actually increase incentives to reduce those inefficient methane emissions. By the way, I'm showing you that sheep there because it's an example. I'm half Irish and my mother comes from the west of Ireland, and there are a lot of very inefficient sheep in Ireland where they're not really producing very much, but they are producing methane. And although they're very beautiful, I think the world can do without them. If we focus on warming impact, not carbon footprint, it also makes clear, and this is a very important message to you, there is a place for a sustainable livestock industry in a net zero world. But a sustainable livestock industry cannot be one that grows and grows forever. We have to find a path to manage methane emissions, to start to reduce them, to end the contribution of livestock to global warming for good. And that can be done. And I think we can do it by working together. Thank you.
That these calculations can be reviewed so we can have a better look at this. Another thing that I thought was very efficient, and we see that more and more, this is the answer for us to keep on getting this food safety. Thank you once again. I want to thank Nick Smith for participating and for everyone. Do you guys want to say anything else before we finish?
Para perguntas?
I don't think we do. No, no, we don't. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for participating. And here is room for you to say your last words here today.
I'm going to use my last words to maybe ask something of Miles that he can speak to in his last words. Often an interpretation of that very clear methane explanation you gave is that, well, the quickest way for us to reduce temperatures then is to completely cut methane emissions by, for example, greatly reducing livestock, which is one take on the data, which I'll hand over to him. Thank you again to the organisers for having me here to speak.
Obrigada mais uma vez.
Thank you again.
Bom, ele falou sobre o Miles.
He talked about Miles. If Miles wants to say his final considerations, feel free to do so.
Well, I think I was just given a challenge, and I think it's very important to keep the benefits of reducing methane emissions, important though they are, in perspective. We could eliminate livestock agriculture around the world, and we would reduce global temperatures by mid-century by a few hundredths of a degree. So that's 2 or 3 years of fossil-fueled warming at the moment. And once we've done it, if we don't reduce fossil fuel emissions, then after a few years, we're back to exactly where we were before, because the benefit of reducing methane emissions is quick, but once you get it, it's done. It's a one-off win. And so as long as carbon dioxide emissions are still driving up global temperatures, you can sort of make it small, but then it keeps going up. And then a few years later, you're exactly where you were before. So the elephant in the corner is carbon dioxide. We have to get carbon dioxide emissions to net zero. We can help, we can benefit, we can lower peak warming by reducing methane emissions. But if we don't get carbon dioxide emissions to net zero, then pretty much everything else is moot. So that's my main message to you, is that yes, we can help by reducing methane emissions. And yes, it's very important to be clear on how we can help in order to be fair on the different sectors involved. But you have to remember that the big picture is carbon dioxide, the vast bulk of which is coming from fossil fuel use.
Agradeço também pela.
To take all that into consideration. Thanks, Diana, also for being here with us.
Of methane from wild animals. There was a really good study by Pablo Mazzano who looked at the difference between the wild animals on the Serengeti and the cattle production done by the traditional pastoralists, and found that the cattle had less emissions than the wild wildebeests, and they performed the same ecosystem function that the wild animals are doing. And in North America, we don't have net more ruminants emitting methane than we did before the colonizers came and eliminated the bison and all of the other animals that were there that are no longer there. So those are just important things to consider when everyone is attacking cattle, because we have more cattle today, but we have less bison and all of the other animals that we did in before the 1800s.
Perfeita essa reflexão, Diana.
What a great reflection, Diana. Thank you. Thank you, guys, for your contribution. It was a pleasure being here, you two. Congratulations to the organization. Now let's move on to the next panel. We thank our panelists. Please take your seats. We'd like to record the presence of Dr. Juliano Villaverde from our government and coordinator for the environmental chamber in the federal public ministry. Now we're going to talk about cooperation, new times, new challenges, new tasks. I would like to invite the participants, Mr. Lorenzo Carrasco, sociologist, please, Mr. Lorenzo Carrasco, also Vicente Nogueira, coordinator from the Milk Chamber for the cooperatives here in Brazil. I'd also like to invite Maria Cecilia Zenezo Camaero. She's an agronomist that will be the moderator of this panel.
Peço a atenção de todos, pois antes de darmos início a este painel, convido a todos a assistirem um vídeo que ilustra o que...
Now, guys, let's all watch a video that will illustrate what we are now going to watch a video.
iniciar o painel e depois nós voltaremos com o vídeo que será exibido.
Desculpe, mas eu não estou recebendo agora. So now, Maria Cecilia, take the floor. We couldn't show the video. Good morning, everyone. I will say hi to you all. I feel honored to be here in this panel. I'm very grateful to Aldo and Daniel. Without God, we wouldn't be here. And now I pass on the word to the speakers, and I hope we can have a good talk about cooperativism and the new challenges and new times that we're gonna face. How to fight hunger. Thank you very much. When in January I was commenting with my friend Ministro Aldo Revelo about the strikes in Europe at the end of January when there were the strikes in Germany, in France, I was thinking about this. This removed the veil from a narrative, this word that you are using a lot, a big change. Por que eu não estou ouvindo o relay? And with all the producers in South America, and why we have this idea. And what was being done in Europe. So part of this is not for the average producer, but the real food producer. What it reveals is that the environmental legislation o acordo, the Green Deal, is focused against the production for the European producers. So this gives us a very important question because it takes us basically to the environmental attacks are not focused on emissions or the producers. They aren't very well focused on the food production. So if we are living in Europe, it's an attack to the food production. The reduction of the planted area, the reduction of cattle production. The same basically happens in Brazil. The attack in South America and also for the production of food in Amazon, in Paraguay, in Argentina. And this handles us a third question, the potential that exists politically to unify a big producers alliance in the defense of food production, going against food, hunger and the central policies. So this revolution from these strikes from the producers in Europe shows that this is happening because fighting is not the interest of the producer of in South America, making it even more frail for them. So it's also not the interest for the producers in Europe to make frail the producers in South America. There is something very important. In South America, the producers, in a huge part, all descend from Italians and Germans. So what is the reason for people to have this confrontation, this shock that is happening in the bureaucracy in the European Union, in all the policies from the NGOs and so on? So it's a huge opportunity to be able to build an alliance of producers so that we can have food available. So this is the main reason for this. And what we can say is that yes, we are honoring the memory of Josué de Castro and Paulo Tello, but not from what has already happened. But for them as idealizers, they imagined that we were going to have this opportunity to revert this process, to really be able to deal with this and eliminate hunger. So that way we can understand and have subsidies because the big food markets are in Asia and in Africa. If you can't dispute this free trade model, and we're gonna open this, and that way that they're gonna do it the same way, because the producers have to understand that all mental understanding can be harmful what they are feeling, and they will be the big allies so that we won't have this lack of information. And I say that at COP30 it will have an opportunity to not only be social environmental, and it means that I was hoping that our friend Muniz from the Federal Agricultural Body for the Amazon, because I believe that the National Confederation for Agriculture in Brazil could think that at COP there could be an element to raise the theme of food production and talk about hunger and the social environmental theme. it can bring and show the Amazon and the misery that exists there, and also about the agricultural production. I want to show you what the Netherlands is saying. This is a shocking event, the election of the next government, and so I'm going to show here for the ideas. It's curious. The only cows that have a nationality are the Netherlands cows. And it's clear when you look at the Netherlands, you think there is there a windmill, a woman with characteristic clothes, and they see a cow. And the bureaucracy from Europe happens in Brussels, and they messed up with the wrong cows. They messed up with the wrong cows, people. And this is what the new government that will take over in Holland, are they going to impose a change to green radicalism? There is the Freedom Party, the new social contract, and more importantly, the movement between the farmer and the citizen, and what came up in the strikes at the end of last year. It was created in 2019 to oppose the radical policies from the union for 2030. The Green Deal, with the pretense to reduce greenhouse gases emissions and the reduction of hydrogen in agriculture. So it means to close off up to 30% of the farms and substitute gas heaters for electric heaters, which have a much higher cost. And the collision, and there are manifestations. And even though the troubled scenarios should become more and more extreme, none of that has happened. And Kanderplas, thanks to the efforts from your party, the obligation of electric heaters will be substituted, and now people won't have to sell their farms, only if they want to. So high quality agriculture is being protected, and because we have a problem with food safety worldwide. But the production in Holland can help. And I said, this is the line we have to follow. And another distancing with the new plan, and they mean to close off subsidies for electric cars in 2025, apart from refusing the reduction of the cattle to lower the methane. And this is coming to the new government in the Netherlands. We have elections in June for the EU, and this will bring important issues to this green agenda. The same thing that will happen when anticipating the elections in England. It's a big irony, and I say that whether it's coming from the Netherlands, because that's the origin of the methane movement. It's the environmental home from they started this, and one of the founders for healthy life, for the WWF, one of the most influent people in the world, and the Literalist Fund, another very important to make the Worldwide Foundation be financed. So it's a big strike for decarbonization, the production of clean energy, fossil fuels, and having more low carbon agriculture, carbon credits with the right to pollute. So the Netherlands once again understands that it says that they have to have nuclear energy. They don't like carbon, so let's use nuclear energy. So this has all been spoken before, but the strikes all over Europe that started in 2022 in Sri Lanka, they limited all the decrease for organic agriculture. That's all that they could do. And we have all these protections in Belgium, Holland.
and Romania, and then it's in some countries since 2023, leading the European Union to postpone the measures of Green New Deal. And then the decarbonization thing had two problems in COP28 because the countries showed that there was a demand. So the record in the oil production, 102 barrels per day. So the production, 8.3 millions of tons. So India has 73% of the generation of electricity via carbon plants, and this will increase by 2030. So China has built 123 thermoelectric plants, and oil and is responsible for 70% of the primary energy source. And so the banks, the main banks, they give up the ESG agenda and the green funds, and BlackRock and JP Morgan and the Vanguard Group publicly do not accept it any longer because they also depend on the investments. And Financial Times shows how the green funds are diminishing. So where will this demand go to if you cannot avoid fossil fuels? We need to limit the production of food. So in here, there's a concentration of several topics. So, so John Kerry is in favor of this policy that has some ESG institutes here. Is the general manager of the World Health Organization, that we need to contribute to diminish 30% of the greenhouse gases. And this is the general manager of the WHO. So in the conferences, we've seen that, and what I want is basically finish this topic with another topic, which is what I called climate colonialism. Africa has several, and 900 million do not have biomass to cook. So this is the biggest rate of death in all the continent. The biggest cause of death is hunger. So what shows the effect of this colonialism? Where you see this green part is Africa, part of South America, large part of the Amazon. We see the scarcity of energy and also hunger, mainly. And here you have an agricultural region that can solve the hunger in the world. But the problem is, how are you going to create a political alliance between food producers at the global level, not of the bureaucracies, not of the Brussels and other countries, but not of the bureaucracy, but of the productions. The Alliance of Global Producers to Fight Hunger, and this is the ideal that I have that Paulinelli anticipated for this moment. So it's up to us to organize all this so that this is accomplished, because this is the first time we have the chance to win for technical reasons hunger in the world, but we need to build a political alliance, which is the fragility of the environmental agenda comes to show and build this production alliance. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're going to watch the video. But before I show the video, I wanted to speak a little. The video that's going to be shown is the video of the Copi Renama from the municipality of Campo Novo dos Parecis in Mato Grosso. Just to add a little bit some things, that the products that are traded in that place, in addition to producing 90,000 sacks to try to feed the world, in face of society, the indigenous cooperatives are not seen by the white society. NGOs, governments, and the society, and an investment society, the financial investment society. This also happened that we try to have access with the government to try to legalize the plantation system, and also that the crop is still hoping that the white society, I apologize to use the word white, but this is how we refer to that the white society looks at our people, because what happens is it's not true that the indigenous people do not want to work. We just don't have the opportunity to do so. And I think that education helps a lot, It's enough of the government saying that the villages cannot work and cannot produce, okay? So this is not true. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. Let's watch the video then.
O povo Halite Pareci, Nambiquara e Manoque se destacam no Mato Grosso por sua busca constante de sustentabilidade e etnodesenvolvimento. Tradicionalmente, nos dedicamos à agricultura e nos últimos 15 anos estamos nos aperfeiçoando no cultivo de grãos. Hoje, estamos organizados com 4 cooperativas que juntas plantam 20 mil hectares de lavoura mecanizada. Isso corresponde a 1,7% da área total do nosso território, localizados entre os municípios de Campo Novo do Parecis, Tangará da Serra, Sapezal e Brasnorte. Nós, da Copi Renama, cultivamos soja convencional, milho, milho pipoca, feijão dos mais variados tipos, sorgo e painço. Distribuídos entre 11 mil hectares de lavoura, nossa produção está estimada em um total de 56 mil toneladas de grãos colhidos entre safra e safrinha, gerando anualmente um total de mais de 120 milhões de reais, dos quais mais de 2 mil indígenas são beneficiados. O projeto de lavoura mecanizada em terra indígena trouxe geração de renda, são mais de 300 empregos diretos e indiretos. Além disso, subsidiamos todas as aldeias cooperadas com projetos de agricultura familiar como a avicultura, piscicultura e outras atividades de aptidão da nossa comunidade. Com isso, estamos conseguindo reverter o êxodo nas nossas áreas indígenas. Nas décadas de 80 e 90, registramos mais de 80% de abandono das aldeias. A implantação deste projeto está proporcionando a ocupação do território original novamente, fortalecendo nossas crenças e costumes tradicionais, bem como a preservação do nosso ecossistema. A fim de efetivarmos a regularização desta atividade, obras estão em andamento nas 11 unidades associadas à cooperativa. Em mais uma etapa deste processo, elaboramos um projeto que consiste em construir uma sede base da cooperativa, uma estrutura de apoio, à altura do nível de produção dos nossos associados. Essa estrutura vai garantir logística, estoque e melhorias na qualidade e variedade de produtos. Com isso, pretendemos reduzir gastos, potencializar resultados e aumentar a competitividade da cooperativa no mercado. Outro projeto ambicioso é a construção de um Instituto Federal de Ensino para o povo indígena, com o objetivo de capacitar futuras gerações com as mais avançadas técnicas do agronegócio. É a Copiranama, exercendo seu papel de instrumento de etnodesenvolvimento com foco na preservação da cultura e independência financeira dos povos Calit Pareci, Nambiquara e Manoque, ajudando a alimentar o mundo, respeitando a fauna e a flora do nosso território.
Just to add, the indigenous is not making Brazil lag back. You know, we are an evolution to Brazil. We don't want indigenous people starving and, being like a beggar, and I apologize if I got emotional now, but I, as an agronomist, an agronomist engineer, I want the best for my people, for the indigenous people. I don't want us to be back because the flag of our country says order and progress, and this is what we wish. Let's continue with the lecture. The video was exciting with Vicente Nogueira, coordinator of the Organization of the Cooperatives in Brazil, OACB. I'll give you the floor. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in this event, to participate in this panel with some emotion now, with true emotion after Cecilia. So I'm very proud, I'm very happy to participate in this meeting with you. So I wanted to bringing the initiatives of OCB for the Minister Aldio Ribeiro. I want to express my admiration for your work, and I am sure that this conference is going to be a watershed in terms of food safety and fight against hunger. But we know that the minister, and since he was a deputy in the House of Deputies, has been making every effort to fight hunger. And with all this interpretation of the Forest Code, that has allowed Brazil to grow sustainably, increase production. I see Argentinian friends in the audience, and I need to mention that while I lived in Brasilia, I was together with you, and your provocation is very relevant. And I think that farmers throughout the world need to be together, but also need to be together in favor of science, because there are a lot of bad information, fake facts, and when the Ministry of Science and Technology that you were in the past, we know that if we use science, we don't need any other support. I did not participate in the event yesterday, but I know that there are ways and a lot of science under development that will reduce the emissions, like the way that we feed the bovine. There are molecules that already can reduce a lot, and with science, we'll be able to transform cooperativism. And with cooperativism, the way that Cecilia mentioned, it is for sure the tool, the strategic framework for us to fight hunger and offer food safety. And we're going to see a little bit about that. I'm going to make a brief presentation here because we don't have a lot of time, and to show the growth in cooperativism as a sector to generate prosperity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about milk because that's my area. And I was in our panel, we had Jai Mehta, and I was going to provoke him because I thought that an Indian man was going to come here very humble, and he came here showing an India that is already the biggest milk producer in the world if we add buffalo, cow, and all the other types of milk. So it's more than 200 billion liters of milk, and with an intent to grow to reach 1/3 of the animal production of milk. So let's go briefly, and I think that I'm going to take to CNA and to the leaders, and maybe the next COP is the appropriate moment for the producers to get together. So at this moment, Antônio de Salvio, that is the son of Antônio Ernesto de Salvio, is the president of the Agriculture Confederation of Minas Gerais, and maybe he will understand this topic better. But anyway, the cooperativism in Brazil represents 4,693 cooperatives, 20.5 million people cooperated, and employs more than 500,000 people. So, not to be very extensive, you can see the several sectors of the agribusiness, credit, and all those sectors that are growing a lot. But I would like to highlight that compared to 2016, we had an increase of 60% in the number of cooperated people. So it's an increase of 45% of the amount of employees and employers in the cooperatives. So cooperatives are growing a lot, and it respond for 22% of the financial system nationally, and it's growing with large staffs. And it's a movement that proposes to be a strategic instrument for the development of communities and in terms of revenue distribution. Now, having one more connection here, Cecilia, if we look at the social programs by the government, like PENAI and all that, they can have a huge contribution. And if you allow this insertion, and if we look at the figures that the cooperatives has been contributing in these programs, we can imagine that cooperativism allows this productive inclusion of those that before could not participate, like the indigenous peoples, and in the cooperativist movement that makes us very proud. So in fact, we at UCB are treating cooperativism as a prosperity instrument. And this big evolution over the past 10 years shows that we can contribute for fiscal policies, development policies, and this is the role of UCD and state organizations of the FESPSP, the National Learning System. And every time we are presenting policies in our segment in the agricultural sector and the fostering policies and everything that involves production in the country and the other and all the branches of cooperativism. So I would like to remember that the UCB system is present throughout the nation. We have the UCB in Brasilia, together with FESPSP and together with the confederation that represents the patronized institutions in the country. So cooperativism can make inclusion in the market. So we have 508 cooperatives in 23 states and 226 municipalities, with a highlight for the state of Paraná and the state of São Paulo. And this cooperativist movement that is organized is what has allowed to generate confidence, scale, and infrastructure to reach the international market. And in more detail, with the livestock sector, we have 1,185 cooperatives, more than 1 million people enrolled, the members, and more than 1,000 collaborators. So that can tell us that cooperativism has a great contribution, with 55% in the production of corn, 53% for soybean, wheat, 75%, milk more than 40%, cotton 48%, bean 48%, and swine 58%. So this movement, this cooperativism, is a movement that is an anchor already, is already an anchor to fight hunger and promote food safety in the country. But of course, that the cooperative system is in all the links of the chain, storage, industrialization, commercialization. I like very much this information because let's say that technical assistance and spreading knowledge is what sets apart the ignorant man from someone that wants to prosper. And within the producers that are connected to the agricultural cooperatives. 63% are assisted somehow. And when we compare that with the total, only 20%. So once again, cooperativism is responsible for prosperity, not only of the economy, but of people, and also fosters knowledge. Now, going back here, but moving towards the end of this presentation, and now showing the part that I know better, which is milk. I wish very much that Mata were here, but he has already left, but I'll send the presentation to him later. We have the last survey, and 160 cooperatives, milk cooperatives, are registered in the country, with a prevalence in the south and southern regions of the country. These milk cooperatives play a social and economic role that is very relevant. 89% of these cooperatives capture up to 300 liters of milk per day, and the cooperated people added, they capture up to 500 liters of milk. So it's a small production. It's a family agriculture production, is 39%. And here the productive milk chain. And looking at this panel and looking at the cooperativism, we have, in terms of challenges, we have a lot of things that need to be done, because the last IBG census identified 1,176 areas that produce milk in Brazil. Also, even with the drop in with the number that was estimated in the previous year. So, and we see Minas Gerais as the biggest area for milk production, and the state of São Paulo did not stick to our policy and diminished a lot the production of milk, but it still contributes for the production in the southern region. And now to wrap up, if we want to strengthen this work, we can make a simple calculation. If we have 1,170,000 units that produce milk, if we consider that each of them employs 4 people, we have more than 4 million people focus on the milk or dairy activity in Brazil. And it's a population that is bigger than the population of Uruguay. So I always make this comparison, because we need to give relevance to this nation of milk producers in Brazil. And we, not forgetting that 86% of them are family agricultures, family farmers. So with that, I wrap up my presentation, and I would like to thank once again, on behalf of UCB, my participation in this event and making myself available to all of you. And I believe this is a new moment, and I'm going to take everything that I learned here to the people that I know, to try to suggest this possibility of creating an alliance between producers towards food safety and fighting hunger, and not only being based on the false science, which is what we do usually. So we are available for whatever your cooperatives need in Brasilia. Okay, thank you.
And so we close our panel on cooperativism and work. New time, new challenges. Challenges will come. New times are here. And the cooperative, as we say, is helping to feed the world. Thank you very much. I want to thank the panelists and ask them to go back into their places. And now we're going to have Future of Field Production, Science and Biotechnology. I would like to invite to the stage Silvia Marrois, president from the Agropecuary Research Company. Also, Tarifa Hausahapi, the manager from the International Center from Biosalina from the United Arab Emirates, and Mr. Gustavo Castañón, president of the Philosophy and Psychology in Minas Gerais, who will moderate this event. Thank you.
Com a palavra, senhor Gustavo Castañón, para a moderação deste painel.
So now let's start the moderation of this panel. Good morning. I've brought a piece of paper here. I'm gonna say some words here. I am a philosophy teacher, so that's what I'm doing here, isn't it? And among so many people that dedicate their lives to feeding the world. So I guess it's because of my other lives, my past lives. I studied economy. I was living a life doing government programs, and to reach that. In the philosophy, when we do our work, we make things clearer, we think about the programs more clearly, and thinking about closing our conference, thinking about what exactly are we doing here? What is this about? So I'll start telling a story. It's not self-help, I promise you. I'm sure it's gonna make sense. I've been writing a very boring technical book about science philosophy, and I asked ChatGPT, of course, I specified a format, and I asked it to give me two examples of laws that we see that way in economy, to give me as an example, and it provided these two supposed alleged legal laws. The first one is the sustainability dogma, saying that if the rate, the extraction rate of a resource, if it's above the production, what is produced through time in a sustainable way, then this kind of resource won't be able to provide for this activity long term. It will finish. And the other law they gave me is shortage of energy, saying that an energy source that if you can't increase the efficiency, and there will be a big problem of the limit of work that it can generate. What are these two things about? What stays alive beyond these two supposed laws that ChatGPT gave me? And now I will go back more than 200 years to the end of the century. If I'm not mistaken, 2 years before the end of 18th century, when Thomas Malthus published his work about the limits of growth for the population. What does the Malthusian theory says? It sounds very evident and self-evident, saying that if you, as the amount of land is limited, You can't have an unlimited populational growth because through time the populational growth will be exponential. The production growth tends to be linear because first you occupy the more fertile lands, you lose on productivity, they run out of land and the population is still growing. And it says that you only have 4 checks, only 4 options to avoid the populational collapse, misery, and disgrace. Having populational checks. One is hunger itself, that will be caused by that. The other one is war. The other one is diseases. I forgot the fourth one. If disasters help. And Malthus, was he evil? I don't think so. In his equation, there was something essential missing, which is what he falsifies from these laws, that they aren't real laws. They are fully fake. And they are still being shown as dogmas and pessimistic dogmas for the new generations, and now in a totally different format. In a way that we say, who doesn't like trees and animals? Come on. None of us want to destroy the Amazon or, extinguish species. That doesn't exist. But what does exist is that in Malthus' equation, there is an essential aspect, which is technology. When our technology advances, our use of natural resources becomes more efficient, but we start using things that we never used before. So, through time, what happens isn't the shortage of food. What happens is that if we have tech evolution, we're going to use land more efficiently and use resources more efficiently and increase the production exponentially as well. As the population grows exponentially, I'm not saying that we are responsible, so let's move to uncontrolled growth of the population. No, but if we invest in technological advancement and incentives for technology, we are gonna be able to increase something that I'm gonna call demographic potential, demographic density. How many people can we feed during the same time and the same place? And here we can see a screen that 20 years ago would be science fiction, a lot of LEDs, wonderful image. And here there is a president of a company that allowed a real fiction, work of fiction, the occupation of Cerrado in the most productive environment possible. Another company president who's working to make another fiction become reality. The agricultural production in the desert, desalinization, and the Arabic desert from Arabic, and desalinized water. And I want to complete my introduction. We are disruptive forces in a deve ter visto. And we increase the capacity. It is we increase the capacity to generate this introduction, and this is what this conference is about. We are anti-Malthusians, not because he was mean. He didn't see the growth and disruption that was falsified for 200 years without interruptions. What I ask myself, these people are Malthusians today. How can they still be after 200 years of fake? So nobody here is Malthusian, and we generate more human beings, which is the biggest richness we can generate for economy. And I want to pass on the word to the teacher. Who's going first? So I'll pass it on to our guest, international guest, Tarifa Al-Zahabi.
Let me thank Excellencies and the organizer for inviting me and for having me with you here. It's a quite exciting time to be in this part of the world. It's absolutely amazing, and it is worth the long flight from Dubai. And greeting from the nation of United Arab Emirates as well. I know that we have a beautiful relationship with your country. May it always prosper, and we have ongoing collaboration. One of the things I would like also to mention that for an afternoon and for the final session of the conference to be moderated by somebody who has really come with a philosophy background is quite challenging. I need my chat GPT as well to ask some questions and help me with the answers, I think. I also heard the interpreter speaking about the Arab desert. It is the desert because desert sounds exciting, and more appealing. And well, thank you again. And I think it's very important where we put the perspectives. The way you started with the discussion with the limited resources that we need to pay attention to and we look at, it is the quite challenge. One of the challenging factors that we have in the Arab world, and again, I think it's a global challenge, is the growing population. And not only of the growing population, also in the Arab world, 50% of the increase in population are youth. So we're talking about young people who have different expectations as well when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to food, when it comes to consumption. So there is a lot of challenges. Given that also the impact of climate change, well, in the Middle East and MENA region, we're also living in a very, not only hot and dry, but it's also heated area with what's happening with the conflicts in the region. It's all have an impact on the food security as well. And also the availability of resources. We at the desert, as you know, United Arab Emirates and also a number of countries in the region, Gulf state countries, we suffer from water scarcity. It is known to the world how the water scarcity is really impacting the world in the region and also globally. However, I will be quoting some of the statistics related with the World Bank where it says that 12 out of the 17 most water-stressed cities are located in the Middle East and North Africa. So we're dealing with a lot of challenges when it comes to that. Not only that, some of you might start even thinking, how come water scarcity and at the same time, we're also dealing with weather extreme condition. You've heard what's happening in Dubai not too long. We were really flooded. We were really having so much of water where it was really an amount of water we used to get in a year, we got in 3 days. So also the impact of climate change that we used to talk about in the past, we read in universities, we've looked at it in books, it's something that we're living at the moment. It's something that we've been witnessing, and we try now to find the solution of how can we really ensure that we're dealing with this extreme weather condition and circumstances. Also, the drought seasons. I must mention that where I work, the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, we also work in 40 countries around the world. All those countries are marginal. They have the same sort of characteristics when it comes to the challenges with water. And also, I've been having, since I joined, a very interesting discussion with colleagues about the soil health. We have also exhausted the soil. There are so many traditional practices that the farmer hasn't been stopped doing, and the soil has been really impacted with soil erosion, with so many things that we have been added to the soil as well. We have now a problem. And beside that, a new generation, new demand, everybody wants to eat berries and strawberries, even if it doesn't grow in the desert. So the overall taste of food has changed. People started to demanding additional factors, additional food, additional methodologies of doing food, which is really harmful. And looking at all those challenges, it was very much important for us to look at the solutions. From the name of the center, it's biosaline. So we tackle the issues associated with salinity. I know that in Brazil, we do have some areas which is suffering from dry weather condition or the dry challenges. Salinity is a big thing globally. It is anticipated that salinity will increase by 50% in 2050. And this is really going to affect the yield, the production, and also increase the land degradation. So we're going to even lose more lands, and that's why we will need to look at how can we reclaim those land, which is going to be more costly. So why do we really wait until lands get even farther degraded, rather than try to be proactive and think about how can we prevent, how can we manage, and how can we reclaim those lands? We're looking at ways. When it comes to water, if we're talking about water consumption, people would need to irrigate anyhow. So if people going to use fresh water, we're not neglecting the fresh water from the formula. But if we're going to use fresh water, let's at least use fresh water wisely. And that's why we're looking at different technology, the power of technology, as you rightly mentioned. At the center, the scientists came up with a number of solutions, of which is how can we do water calculation? We understand exactly the demand of water per plant. How much this plant needs to be irrigated, how often it needs to be irrigated, how much water needs to be irrigated. Because the simple farmers, they irrigate in the summer the same way they irrigate in winter. And that's not really taken into consideration. So by increasing awareness, capacity development and knowledge transfer is very much important for us to work closely with the farmer and ensure that we're sharing the knowledge with them, but also equip that with technologies. The power of GIS and forecasting the weather condition. We're looking for early warning system for drought. If we know and we can anticipate and read the future through AI and through technology, how often we're going to have drought seasons, then we're going to have a better cropping systems. We're going to advise the farmer what they need to plant and what type of crops would they plant. And also we speak about biotechnology. If we look at the type of crops we have, we started looking at crops that are stress-resilient crops. They are heat, drought, and salinity tolerant. And we have a gene bank where it has 16,000 different accession of those crops. And we keep doing a number of tests with these crops and try to enhance those crops through breeding and crossbreeding. And we also have Desert Life Science Lab and having the science to understand the characteristics and the markers of those crops and try to enhance that. We've been trying to introduce new crops like, for example, quinoa. Quinoa is not something really known in where I come from, but it is really known probably in your country as so many other countries. And it's really powerful food because it has nutritional factors. I mean, we heard about the previous session about the importance of nutrition. And this is where we need to push for crops that will also be able to consume by people. They are gluten-free. We're speaking about millets. We worked with FAO last year on the International Year of Millets to try and remember neglected and forgetting food. And these crops like sorghum, for example, we know that with the wheat crisis globally, people are starting to wonder, I mean, how are we going to eat bread? I mean, can we start to cook and eat differently? And one of the solutions that we have adopted, and we think it was useful, how can we really work with farmers? Changing behaviors is very difficult. And if I'm doing the same practices of agriculture, why would you need to convince me to change my diet because you need to save the environment? Why would I care about the environment? Environment is not something tangible. Not every single person can really associate with the environment. And therefore, we started, whenever we introduce a new crop to people, food is personal. So people really gather around food, whether they're happy or sad. So we cannot really take that reality from them. You cannot impose food on people to eat that they do not really like. So what we tried to do is we tried to do a down-top approach, try to create food fair with the crops, with the new crops that we need farmers to adopt. So we do food fair, we try to hire chefs that they're gonna cook those new or foreign crops to these communities in their own culture. So they start really associating with these food by eating them, and later on we try to tell them how to grow them. So it is really a reversed model. Instead of go and sell the science for them, science unfortunately is not everyone's favorite. So we have to make sure that we need and we know how to package science in a way if we want to bridge the gap between science and society. So this is really some of the activities we've done. And again, ensure that we are available through publications and through, again, scientific research, that the scientists, and also collaboration. We've heard from His Highness Sheikh, His Excellency Sheikh Shakhbout bin Nahyan Al Nahyan, the Minister of State, in the opening remark of this conference, how important is the collaboration. Public-private partnership is very much important. The role of the private sector, the role of the integration between scientific institution and also the researcher is quite important for us to come and complement each other's role and try to not reinvent the wheel. We need to learn how we acknowledge each other. We need to complement and not to compete, because I've seen a lot of competition. My background is really academia. So we've always looked at our student as the seed that we always invested in, the plant that we always wanted to see at its best condition. And I think the private sector and the organizations sometimes compete. We need to start to think as if we are students all together, learning from each other, acknowledging each other, and try to cultivate on each other's efforts. So I would like to emphasize the importance of partnership in order for us to tap to all those challenges and ensure that resources are available. We all need to work together to answer the questions, how can we feed the world with fewer resources and being more efficient when it comes to utilizing and using our natural resources. Thank you.
Agora eu devo introduzir, vou errar o nome de novo. Silvia Masruá, presidente da Embrapa.
Bem, bom dia a todos. Eu vou pedir licença para ficar em pé, tudo bem? Bem, primeiramente eu gostaria de agradecer ao Aldo Rabelo pelo convite, ex-deputado, ministro, secretário, a gente não sabe nem o que chama, né? Mas organizado por esse evento. Desde ontem a gente tem ouvido, né, falar muito bem do evento. Eu tive colegas aqui participando também da Embrapa e agradeço aqui pela oportunidade da gente estar aqui hoje conversando com vocês. Uma honra muito grande reencontrar a Tarifa. O ano passado eu estive no Emirados Árabes, tivemos a oportunidade de ter algumas reuniões lá. Muito prazer em revê-la. Seja bem-vindo ao nosso país. E também Gustavo. Gustavo, você comentou, né, que você é filósofo, o que está fazendo nessa mesa? A agricultura hoje ela é multidisciplinar, ela é multifuncional. Eu sou da área de computação e hoje eu sou a presidente da Embrapa. Estou há 35 anos trabalhando com computação aplicada à agricultura. Quando a gente começou a falar nisso há 35 anos atrás, Mas agricultura, computação, e a minha área de doutorado é inteligência artificial. E aí, naquela época, mas que é muito longe da agricultura. Então, eu acho que hoje, cada vez mais, que é para a gente falar de futuro da agricultura, mostra, né, a importância da gente estar aqui discutindo isso. Bem, vamos falar de futuro, né? O reconhecimento da nossa agricultura, todo mundo já tem, né? Como você comentou, Gustavo, graças à ciência e tecnologia, nós chegamos até aqui, né? Nós expandimos na nossa área em 140%, mas a nossa produção e produtividade só em grãos em 580%. Só que agora nós temos aí essa nova demanda de diminuir a insegurança alimentar no nosso país e no mundo todo, né? Cada vez mais, voltando aqui ao tema, né, da multidisciplinaridade, você vê nos relatórios da FAO, quando a gente fala de combate à fome e segurança alimentar, mostrando o papel das tecnologias emergentes nesse processo. Então, hoje, as ciências agrárias, com as ciências exatas, com a antropologia, todas essas ciências trabalhando junto para que a gente possa, cada vez mais, avançar na produção agropecuária. Bem, nós lançamos recentemente, né, a Embrapa completou 51 anos esse ano, e no aniversário da Embrapa nós trouxemos uma discussão que a gente tem feito, né, faz um ano que eu estou na presidência da Embrapa, eu vi o Moretti aqui, que foi meu antecessor, o que acontece? A gente tem discutido muito, né, o papel da Embrapa nesse novo momento, e traz, justamente nessa questão da fome, a gente tem 4 princípios básicos. Primeiro, a sustentabilidade, que foi discutida aqui em vários painéis, que a gente tem que discutir não só a sustentabilidade do ponto de vista econômico, mas ambiental e social, mas não só falar que a nossa agricultura é sustentável nessas 3 dimensões. Eu comecei falando de um dado econômico, né? Mas é importante a gente trazer as métricas de sustentabilidade ambiental e social. Paralelo a isso, quando a gente fala, a gente está passando por várias transições. Comentei com o Aldo, ontem mesmo eu queria estar aqui, mas eu estava no Rio Grande do Sul, fui com os ministros lá para a gente discutir como que a Embrapa, a extensão rural, pode ajudar aqueles produtores rurais, né, junto com as 4 unidades da Embrapa que estão lá no Rio Grande do Sul. E a gente vê o impacto das mudanças climáticas, toda essa questão nutricional. Hoje, um dos grandes desafios é o novo consumidor. A gente sabe, a gente tem filhos, eu tenho filhos, netos, a gente vê o papel que tem a questão, cada vez mais, que o consumidor mais exigente, preocupado com nutrição, saúde e origem dos alimentos. Então, além de sustentabilidade, transparência do processo de produção, rastreabilidade. Além, é claro, da questão da energia renovável, cada vez mais demandada, e o nosso país tem cada vez mais essas oportunidades, né, que produz 2 ou 3 safras no mesmo tempo, podemos produzir energia sem competir, biomassa para a energia, sem competir com a produção de alimentos. E vemos aí que nós temos um grande desafio, né? Nós temos aí 5 milhões de produtores, deles apenas 10% são grandes no nosso país, grandes produtores, e temos aí o desafio do pequeno e o médio produtor, a inclusão socioprodutiva e a digital, para diminuir o gap que existe do pequeno, médio e grande produtor. E, para isso, a Embrapa, mas não só a Embrapa, estou vendo a Thais aqui, né, na parceria com a Exalc, as universidades, os órgãos estaduais de pesquisa, parceria público-privada, é muito importante, a Tarifa comentou sobre isso. Esse é o nosso desafio de um novo modelo de parcerias, né, institucionais, para que a gente possa avançar. Bem, a Embrapa hoje, essa é a Embrapa que tem esse histórico, que faz parte da agricultura brasileira. Eu trouxe alguns números, né? A Embrapa faz balanço social há 25 anos. Né? Cada R$1 investido em 2023, ela retornou à sociedade R$21. E aqui é um pouco da história da Embrapa, começando lá da expansão do Cerrado, como a gente falou, no início dos anos 70, com plantio direto, fixação biológica de nitrogênio. No início da década de 2000, entrou os sistemas integrados, consorciados, integração lavoura-pecuária, integração lavoura-pecuária-floresta. Passamos por uma agricultura de base biológica, bioinsumos, falamos de agricultura de precisão, estamos falando de agricultura de baixo carbono já há mais de 10 anos, visando sempre a sustentabilidade e segurança alimentar. Mas, e a realidade no campo? Bem, tem alguns estudos, esse aqui é da McKinsey, que eu peguei, que me chamou muita atenção, o último estudo que eles fizeram, mostrando que os agricultores mundiais, 20%, estão dispostos a a adotar produtos biológicos, falando aí dessa agricultura de base biológica. Mas os brasileiros são os que mais adotam, os produtores brasileiros. Eles colocam que eles, 29% adotam sistemas integrados, 83% plantio direto, e quando fala de bioinsumos, biocontrole, bioestimulantes e biofertilizantes, são os que mais adotam. E qual que é o futuro que estamos plantando nessa linha? Primeiro, a agricultura hoje, quando a gente fala, ela é multifuncional, que foi o que a gente começou a falar. E pensando na agricultura regenerativa. Tudo começou, como você mesmo comentou, né, do solo. Né? E a importância que a gente tem a saúde do solo para tudo isso. E hoje nós não podemos, né, com essa evolução que tem da agricultura e com essa demanda de produção de alimentos, de combate à fome, tem esses princípios. Isso produzir com uma agricultura de baixo carbono, com práticas mais sustentáveis, bioeconomia. Quando se fala em bioeconomia no nosso país, não existe uma única bioeconomia. Na verdade, dependendo do bioma, dependendo da onde que você está trabalhando, com os tipos de recursos biológicos que você está trabalhando, seja animal, vegetal ou micro-organismos, e o bioma que você está trabalhando é uma outra bioeconomia. A Amazônia é diferente da Caatinga, que é diferente do Cerrado. Então, tem uma demanda muito grande aí de estudar essas várias bioeconomias. Edição gênica entra aí, hoje, né, a gente falando de biotecnologia, edição gênica entra, a Embrapa já trabalha com isso também há bastante tempo, tecnologias quânticas aqui, e aqui eu estou falando desde análise de solo, estou falando de computação quântica, estou falando também de criptografia, tudo isso hoje...
And simulation. So this is what we see when we increase the models of climate forecast. Due to these problems, we will need more and more quantum computing to follow these climate changes. Then we have automation, digital economy. So at Embrapa, we have a route, and this is the route that we have been taking for some time. And now we go to fossil-based agriculture to a biological-based agriculture. We have a route of bioeconomy that we have been following. And to talk a little bit about that, how do we look at that based on what we've learned and lessons learned and how we can improve? The success in our agriculture was based on three pillars: science allied to public policies, and technology and rural extension. So this was the secret that has taken us to where we are. So how can we renew that, the system of agriculture, based on these three pillars? When we think about mitigation, when we think about climate changes, we need to think not only about mitigation, but about adjustment as well. And for that, I brought a project that we have that is the recovery of degraded pastures, because we have around 60 million pasture areas, and 40 million of them have degraded areas at different levels. And more or less 28 million hectares we can use for agricultural production. So we can recover these areas and use them for agricultural production. So for a better managed pasture. So we have a program again that's allied with the science, public policies, and technology transfer that we have been developing. So, and then I brought some data from a friend of ours that works in the Amazon. When I took office at Embrapa, I started to collect some data, thinking about how we could improve the communication of what we have already done to bring new insights. So what happened in this study that they work with the Amazon for 25 years, they proved that working with consortium systems of pastures, there was a decrease of 35% in the greenhouse gas emissions. So we need this data to show that to the world. So I thought it was very interesting to bring that. In this carbon line, I put the history. Embrapa has been working with that for over 15 years with the idea of low carbon agriculture. And I had the opportunity to participate in several public policies. And this one of the low carbon agriculture, neutral carbon meat was all based on the protocols of sustainable practices that were targeted at determining soy, low carbon soy, coffee, low carbon, and all those more sustainable practices to be used as a reference to create these seals. Simultaneously, and this was pretty much to do with Renovabio. There was a new public policy that we used to stimulate the publicists. É muito rápido.
And Paula is also here. She had an important role, and we started working with this calculator for carbon calculator and for the carbon footstep. Why am I saying that? I said we have a challenge to bring that and help discussion for the federal government, the rural producers. What are these data? What is this data? Whether it's for the inventory or for us to work and be able to have negotiations like Green Deal, any one of them. We need to get that and generate these parameters. And we are working with Integra Carbono and Embrapa. We are integrating data from many years to generate these metrics, and we have a support, and we are talking to legislative power, also federative power, and this is our strategy right now. Talking about digital agriculture, as I mentioned before, when we used to talk about that before, it was tough because we had no data. So I finished my doctorate 20 years ago. So we would do the jobs with few, with just a little bit of data. Now everything is connected. We have data. That's why ChatGPT may get it wrong, but it will improve and keep improving because more and more it's going to have algorithm data that's going to be better and better. So we have a challenge and we understand and we are going to improve using AI in agriculture. And here I'm talking about all links in the chain before entering the farm, during being in the farm, and afterwards. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we think about drones, satellite images, or data from agrometeorological stations to measure the weather, but the intelligence, artificial intelligence, comes before. Now we can have this genic measurements because we have algorithms to do genic edition. So when you talk about post-production, distribution, logistics, you can use the Internet of Things, other data, other sensors to use this. At Embrapa, we have a roadmap that we work with. We've worked it for many years. And back in the day, when we used to work with that to classify diseases, I had a network of phytopathologists with 20 colleagues to classify diseases. Back then, we didn't have that many images. We had a more capital image. And we have data banks with many diseases, with many image banks, and this vision. And looking at what? The digital twins. And then we think with the evolution of computing, that's not just evolving for the rural producer. And we have the cost, and then we go there, do the trials, and you have less hypothesis for the simulation. So now computing is the third pillar of science that we're talking about here, working with theory and experimentation, and we have the third pillar, which is computing. And then there's a whole new area of quantum technologies, but we have been working with this for many cultures, from classification up to soil analysis and many physical chemical data. We've also got biological data. By using these technologies, we have evolved a lot, using equipment, sensors, magnetic resonance equipment, lasers. So we've been working on that, and now we have a partnership with a startup at Embrapa that they have Vera certification for soil data analysis. And we also have discussions about bioeconomy. We talked a lot about it here. In Brapa, we've always tried to look for a roadmap at bioeconomy in the country. And here you can see that these items are pretty much these ones we've been using with bioprocessing of renewable energies, exploring many biomes, biodiversity, looking at not just guaranteeing food safety, but the food itself and reducing losses. Then, what have we done for biotechnology that you asked us to write down? And here at Embrapa, for more than 10 years now, we had the mixed units. And then right before that, it was connected. We had gene and working with model plants, then with other cultures such as soy, corn, and small at Unicamp. We had them studying and working with Embrapa. And then we developed that area, and now we're collecting results. And this involves many units at Embrapa and many units. And with biotechnology and remembering how much work they had to do. And then I will resume this. And we've been working with many omics, genomics, metabolomics, and now we're working with intersection of this with the phenotyping, digital phenotyping. And we have phenotyping platforms that we don't have in abroad, and working to bring this to Brazil, and with biology, computing, and genetics. I've already said that. And here we are working with gene theory. We've been working with gene edition, and maybe 10 years. And from 10 years now, we've been working with this. And there are some examples here that I mentioned. One in 2022, when we approved back in City and Bio the first edition of the genome from soy using the CRISPR technique. And now we approved the first first pig with genome that's been edited in Brazil. They become immune to this syndrome that they suffer from. We've just approved this. So more and more we are working on approving this kind of work in different countries. And to finish off, I think everything we said about science and biotechnology, I wanted to bring to you that the future of agriculture is sustainability, multifunctionality. This is the big difference. It's a different model that we have to work on agriculture. We graduate per discipline in academia, so it's a good idea to think about disciplinarity. It's necessary to invest in research and innovation. As Tarifa said, the partnership, whether it's public, private, they are both important. At Embrapa, we've been advancing on public-private partnerships with more companies, but we have a challenge that the big multinational companies and private companies, even startups, they want partnerships to have results in the short term, and with research takes longer. So we need to use this trade-off for investment, especially for public investment in this trade-off. Public policies are necessary. I would like to mention this a differential we have in Brazil, Aldo, and I've seen this. I've worked since the beginning with this when we first started talking about climate change just 20 years ago, how to make simulations and help and find the best moment for the producer to plant what, when, what's the best way to do it. It was difficult at that time to organize my data. Since 2015, we restructured all of this because we had new technologies, and this is a trend. And then you see so many others, ABC, Renova Bio, the challenge of decarbonization, how we're going to make a public policy, how can it subsidize a public policy. And we have challenges for public policies for the small and medium producer. I talked about this recovery of lands, and we've had the information about agricultural zoning, and we can see how we can explore better the degraded areas in the Northeast, all over the country, bringing opportunities and the emerging technologies coming up. And here I like to mention the roadmap. Embrapa is doing this with colleagues, scientists, automation, precision agriculture, all of the sciences. But our challenges now is this convergence to add value and have a much better convergence here and multifunctionality. That's why a philosopher is also important here. Okay, just to finish, I wanted to comment with you that recently we had G20. It's happening in our country. Embrapa coordinated G20 with 20 countries and research institutions from these 20 countries in May. And it was very interesting. And the discussion now was about fighting hunger. We had an executive summary and a discussion on how to plan COP30 using the subsidy from G20 and how we can take advantage of COP30 to have this technological window to show this. We need to improve communication. To improve that, we need data. That's why I'm saying this time and time again. And also we need to take advantage of this moment to bring Embrapa, all our partners, and everyone who are partners, and other universities, other institutions, so that we can take advantage of this moment and show the world how sustainable our agriculture is, not just economically, but also environmentally and socially, and show our experience, as I began saying here in the north of the country, Amazon, and Embrapa has been working with this system for so long, show how this bioeconomy can add value, can improve income. It was a classical example, I loved it, from Cecilia, showing in Mato Grosso, the indigenous community, how much they've evolved with cooperatives. And we've been working with Embrapa, the producers section, to discuss what are their challenges digitally. And they start with connectivity and their demand for photovoltaic to improve energy, renewable energy. And we have a moment, and I invite you, Tarifa, to be here in 2025 in November and to see a bit more of what we do. But I'm sorry I ran over.
Gente, eu já fui.
Guys, I've been told we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask Tarifa a question. I wanted to ask one to you too, but I don't know if we're going to have time. You spoke a lot. And I'm very curious to know what's the state right now, Tarifa, and maybe you can answer that. The desalinization of the usage of salinated waters for agriculture. What are the main challenges that you see for you really to start using it a lot? What are the technological limitations you have?
The fact that I mentioned about water scarcity, our region depends on water desalination. And one of the main challenge is how can we really bring this to efficiency in terms of cost. So there is a big call at the moment, and again, this is an invitation for all organizations in Brazil who are working on the water desalination field. We're looking for a water initiative. It has been launched by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the President of United Arab Emirates, inviting the private sector to come up with a solution in order for them to promote for the cheapest, cost-efficient method for water desalination. However, with water desalination, we've been suffering from the rejected water from desalination, the brackish and brine water. As a FESPSP product, I mean, it is a result of desalination. It's a product which is highly salinated, and usually it used to be injected in the ground in the past or thrown back to the sea. And the impact now is being seen because when you put it back in the sea, that has increased the salinity level of the sea, given that the Arabian Gulf is closed. So with the evaporation, that made many of the marine life depart and leave the ocean. So that was one of the impact that we have been seeing in that area. Another one is if you also inject it in the ground, the injection in the ground has also increased the salinity of the groundwater because, I mean, again, with the movement of the groundwater, it has transferred into different level, and that has also increased to the salinity. So the question is, what can we do with the brine and brackish? We came up at ICBA with a solution. It's called Integrated Aqua Agriculture System, where every single drop is counted. I'll give you the example. If we have a water that is desalinated, we use the fresh water to irrigate the cash crop, cucumber, tomato, lettuce, whatever can be irrigated with the fresh water, and the product passed from the desalination, the brackish or the brine, is transferred and put in a water tank. And this water tank is used to grow fish. So it is one system where you take the clean, fresh water, irrigate fruit and vegetable. You take the high saline water, put it in a tank, and try to grow fish. We've done a number of experiments over this type of fish, and we are using tilapia fish at the moment. Tilapia is a river fish. However, it has a high tolerance level to entertain salinity. Also, there is another type of fish is being used in Egypt, in the American University of Cairo, and also Central Asia. And also, we're trying now to collaborate with them to explore even different modality of what can grow in this fish tank. The waste water from the fish tank is we irrigate with it the helophytic crop. Helophytes is the salt-loving crops. So we identify helophytes, we grow helophytes in an open field or in a bun, and then we try to irrigate it with the high saline water, which is, again, it has been fertile better with the fish. So we grow, for example, saliconia. And saliconia, they call it sea asparagus. And it is really very popular in Netherlands and many of the Scandinavian countries. It's a highly salted vegetable. And we are using now siliconia for commercialization. There are so many crops you can do from siliconia. You can extract it and you can make salt. Or you can use it for salad, or it even can be used as dried as chips, naturally salted chips. So this is really a model where we are now trying to replicate in different countries. It gives you a very circular economy type of a model where there is no waste, and also it gives you the protein intake when you consume the fish, as well as it gives you the vitamins and your intake from the fruit and vegetables.
Thank you very much. Bem, eu vou encerrar, porque eu fui comandado aqui. Chamo o mestre de cerimônia, não sei se eu devo anunciar a próxima. Obrigado.
Nós agradecemos a todos que
we would like to thank everybody that shared this panel with us. Please take your seats back. The International Conference Josué de Castro on Food Safety and Combat to Hunger has approached several key topics and broadened the dialogue between the government and the state, stimulating cooperation and leaving a legacy for continuous improvement of issues regarding food safety. Right now, I would like to call to the stage our host, the Municipal Secretary of International Affairs of the State of São Paulo, Aldo Rebelo.
Boa tarde. São breves palavras de agradecimento.
Hello, everybody. So I would like to mention here that our activity is crowned with a lot of success. It's a successful activity. I would like to reiterate here my deepest thank and gratitude to all of those that have participated in this conference, our speakers, our lecturers, our panelists, and all those that participated. We just heard about the competence of Embrapa in the person of her President Silvia. After 50 years of Embrapa, I would like to remind you that I was the one to require the solemn ceremony of the anniversary of Embrapa at the National Congress. And we have now here a discussion about these two main challenges, food safety and fighting hunger, celebrating two great Brazilian citizens that were committed to that in their history. And we saw that food safety depends on three elements and three main factors that need to be combined. The existence of natural resources. With no soil, with no water, with no climate, it's much more difficult to produce food. So the concerns that Tarifa exposed here reflect this preoccupation. So how can you find the resources in natural sources to produce food? The second factor is that of knowledge. And it's not general knowledge. It's a very specific kind of knowledge, because we do not have one agriculture in the world. You cannot talk about agriculture as a singular thing. It's a multidisciplinary topic. We have agriculture involves technology, small agriculture, medium agriculture, poor agriculture, agriculture in different biomes and different climates. It's the Cerrado. at Pampa, at Pantanal, at the one from the Amazon. So we need to have knowledge with about all these kinds of agriculture, and especially to this that may be a solution for the world, which is the knowledge in tropical agriculture that may be a solution to the whole world. You know, the semi-arid soils, temperate soils, because regarding those we already have knowledge, and Embrapa is exactly the institution that has helped us find these pathways, and just like any many other institutions of other of a high quality, like the Superior School of Agriculture, Luiz de Queiroz, and several others. We have several centers and research centers in tropical agriculture. And this is the knowledge that can make feasible to have a more productive agriculture. And the third factor that is also very important is you can have public services with quality participating in a contest. So you have the municipalities, the state, and the union. You're not going to get a young boy from Copacabana or Jardins, from a fancy region of the city, and believe that they're going to become a farmer. You know, you have to have an identity with your mission. And we have here in Brazil these people, and we need to educate these people. How do we train? How do we educate? That is why the cooperation between us cannot be only academic. We need to extend our activities. The extension, rural extension, is very important. It's an activity that we have reduced a lot in Brazil, you know, because they are those that sell agricultural products. And we have reduced the size and the commitment of the state with rural expansion, which is fundamental, because rural expansion is what's going to help us form and create and train new farmers. I live here, around here, and my political life has always been very urban, but my roots are rural. In Sertão from Alagoas, I was studied in the rural school. I studied in an agricultural school. So I never lost my connections with these memories from the roça. So, and I believe that this conference was somehow a tribute to this challenge and to this task. Once again, thank you very much, everybody. With a feeling of union and engagement in favor of a relevant and urgent cause, we are wrapping up our works here. And we would like to thank you all for your presence. I would ask you to please not forget to give your headsets back upon leaving this room. And you are all invited to a lunch that is going to be served right next, okay? Thank you very much, and have you all a great afternoon.